to this edition, which is really quite a mixture of things, as I talk about various things, including the second of the tool time tips, which I'm now doing, a bit more about the work on the building a good shed, the work around building high Elven, and one of the reasons you're not seeing any trains run is that I've got things all over the place, so I can't actually run any trains at the moment, and one or two other things as we go through this episode. So let's get straight on and move into the new section where I talk a little bit about the tools that I use for scratch building. Well, this is the second of the small sections that I'll be doing over the next few videos, just talking about the tools that I use for scratch building. And I thought before I got on to actually looking at particular types of tools, that I would talk a little bit about how I get to see things. Now, fortunately, on the whole, my eyesight's pretty good. My glasses, I thought, are pretty good, although I'm probably due a trip to the opticians because it's a couple of years since I had this prescription. But otherwise, I can see pretty well. But even with that, there are times when you need help in seeing what you're doing. Particularly, actually, I found seeing things in a decent light, because if you're using normal sorts of overhead lights, particularly when we had incandescent lights, it doesn't give you true colour. The main thing that I've been using, and we've had this in the family for a long while, it was originally bought to deal with cross stitch, was this magnifying lamp which has a daylight bulb in it, so that when you're looking under there, colours give the true colour you would see from normal daylight, rather than the attenuated colour that you would get from using an incandescent lamp. And that did me in good stead for most things, but it is obviously pretty fixed. I saw, and some of you will have seen it as well, I think, in your Facebook streams, those of you who are on Facebook. One thing that's been coming up for me, because it's obviously worked out that I like modelling, has been a headband, and encouraging me to buy one from the United States at around about $60, I think. So I went onto Amazon and I came up with the headband that you can see here, with which I am very pleased. And what I may do, once I've used it a bit more, is I'll come back and tell you how I'm getting on with it. I've used it at the weekend to do some close work. It has you can change the lenses. This is just the standard one-time magnification lens. You can actually fit two lenses, and so therefore multiply up the value of the lenses. And if you want to look like a cyberborg, you can also bring that lens in front, which I can't remember how many times that multiplies whatever this lens is. So I've not yet tried the maximum magnification on this thing. The real benefit is, I'll turn this away from the camera, is the LED lights, which have two brightnesses. And this is obviously can be posed in whatever direction you need to get the light to go to it. The headband's fully adjustable, and I'm very pleased with it. I used it at the weekend, and the clarity of the vision through those lenses, wearing my bifocal glasses, was simply superb. So I'm looking forward to using that more and more. And as I said, if I try and remember, in a few weeks' time, I'll just tell you how I'm getting on in actually using it a bit more than I have already. The only other thing that I use, which I came across, I think it was on the Squire's stand, but I may be wrong about that, was this pair of tweezers, which has a magnifying glass attached to it. Now, usually, magnifying glasses of this kind, the lenses are awful. The lenses you get on a set of those helping hands is cheap glass, and so you can't expect much. This is really excellent and is fixed just right for the tweezers underneath and for the distance between the two. And I've found that really helpful when doing some close work and moving things around. But the main toy is this one. I went onto the Amazon site. That cost me about £30, and they're now out of stock, and they don't know when they're going to get them back in. But that was for this whole kit. But I will put a link in here to the out of stock version, but it will at least give you a chance to have a look around and see if there's something similar. So that's all for the tool tips, because the aim of this is to keep it within 4 or 5 minutes. for this episode, but in the next one I will deal with the various glues that I've been using, because I've had a specific request to talk about that, but that will be in the next episode. This shows the construction of the small kit of the Metcalf crane, which I've put into the goods shed, and this shows all the pieces waiting to be put together. You start by assembling the various wheels, one for the end of the frame and then two, as you can see finished here, that provide the gearing for the chain, before you then assemble the main frame, which is made out of 4 pieces to give a good thickness of the finished model, and these are laser cut. There's the finished frame, and then you start work by putting the what would be iron brackets into which the first wheel would go, and there you see the wheel stuck in, and then your attention can turn to putting the main wheel with the smaller wheel inside that provides the gearing on the pulley structure, before you create the base, into which you can then insert the frame now made up with the various wheels attached. And now all that's left to be done is to think about putting the chain on, and the bits that act as the iron guard around the base of the frame, into which the frame would be slotted. The chain is then put round and you have the completed model. In the last video, I think I mentioned that I'd be working on the goods shed, and this was the kit that I thought I was buying the first time round and ended up with an engine shed. I've got it almost to the finished stage. The glue's just drying in places for the fitting of the lights, which it explains the little bit of tape, masking tape, that's holding the wire there as it sets in the glue. One sort of slightly amusing point: this roof is on the wrong way round, and this chimney is meant to be higher. When I was fitting this, I'd put the roof on top, and I was thinking, well, it's not like Metcalf to build such a sloppy thing as that the roof doesn't fit, it bumps into the roof. And it never for a moment occurred to me that the reason this wasn't going on is that I had stuck the roof on the wrong way round. But indeed, that is precisely what I had done. So the adaptation that I've had to make is to shorten the chimney. But the chimney smoke now goes straight up on the underside of the roof, and I've stuck this all together just so well that it would ruin the kit to take it apart. You'll see that I've used the York model rail tiles again. I do think they look good. If I put the whole roof on, I wasn't actually going to do this, but I just thought to myself, it just looks so much better, which has left me with a slight dilemma, because this, if I bring it in both into shot, is the single engine shed which sits up at High Elven, and this is going to sit alongside this roof and the roof on the station. Yes, so I suspect at some point I am going to have to retrofit these slates onto here, otherwise it really is going to stick out. That's going to be quite tricky, I think. I really don't want to be trying to get these out. These are very well stuck in, as is this here, so I'm going to have to find a way of working round that, which is going to be entertaining. In terms of what's going on inside the goods shed, let me just move this here. What I will do at this point is put up some film that I took looking directly down on top of the goods shed. So looking down from the top, in the top left corner, there are a number of pallets which are made up from a kit that I'll show you in just a moment. Some barrels that I've sat on the kit. These were wagon loads, but they were of crated goods, so I put them together. The lights hanging down, and the crane, which you have already seen being constructed. So talking about the kit, which I must confess is an excellent kit, but drove me to complete distraction. If I show you this kit here, you can see some of the bits of it. The pallets, individual pallets, are made up of 3 parts, which is, I think that's the top, I can't remember if it's the top or the bottom, 3 stretchers, and then these I think are called stringers, which hold everything together. And the idea is that you cut out the stretchers and put them in this jig with the straight edge uppermost, stick the top on, then you can release everything once the glue's dried and stick the stringers on. It's damn fiddly work at end gauge, it has to be said. Really fiddly. 5 were made really quite well. The 6th one drove me to distraction, at which point I put everything back in the packet before they all went in the bin. It is a brilliant kit. It just takes a lot of patience, and mine had worn thin by the time I finished the crates that are in the corner. But they do look rather well. If I just tip them up again, you can see that they give a nice view of them stacked in the corner there, and one with some barrels on as well. So that's an excellent kit from Scale Model Scenery. If you're double O gauge or O gauge, it'll be a doddle. So that's really everything here. I think, oh no, one thing just to say, what I've not yet done on this or on the station is fit gutters and drain pipes. And that is happening once I fix the roof. This I'm going to fix the roof on solidly, I think, because it doesn't bend just as nicely as the station one. The station one I may, if I can get it just to rest on as I want, I may leave it without, so I can get it off if I need to change the lights. But with this one, I think I'm going to need to stick it down. And I also need to put on the barge boards for the end of the building. The barge boards that come with the kit, I'm trying to think if this is the kit for this kit. No, this is one. This is a barge board that came with the station, the engine shed kit. And it's just a bit flimsy. So using it as a template, I have created a barge board out of stripped styrene and painted it up in the red colour. And on the good shed, I've already put one of the barge boards in, which you can see here. I think if I try and get the light down a bit, so you can get a better view of it. And I think that looks much better. And of course, it does go with the window frames and with the general colour scheme of the whole thing. And the light has gone rather dark here. Okay, I think that's enough now, and I'll move on to the next section, which is going to be talking a bit about the beginning to lay track at High Elven. Well, here you can see High Elven beginning roughly to take shape. I've put the buildings on because that will give you a better idea of where the tracks eventually end up. And you'll remember from the plans that I've shown, and this shows you just how accurate those plans are, because now that I've put the track down, it is in exactly the right places. You may see, if I go over and zoom in a little bit, that the bridge has become a much brighter structure. And this is a word of warning to you, those of you, if you're going to paint something a very dark grey, it's not a good idea to change your mind and decide that you now want it white. The red went on very easily indeed. No problem with the red. The white, on the other hand, has taken about 3 or 4 coats in places, and I've stopped painting it because just the sheer amount of paint there is in places. So a word to the wise: if you're not sure what colour scheme you're going to use, don't go for dark grey. It just doesn't work. So turning now to the rest of the station, you can see I'm going to actually start track laying once this video, well, maybe by the time the video actually releases I will have started. But there really isn't much in the track laying, I don't think, he said, famous last words, because all I've got to do is add the track, which is all flexi track, that provides the straight or slightly curved sections that complete the track. So the 2 sidings will come down to about here. There's going to be a straight, obviously, line going right through the good shed, which will end probably a little way past, but trying to keep an even line of the sidings. And then obviously a track that comes off and down through the engine shed, and one that then goes on to terminate in the train shed. I'm trying to remember all these sheds, it gets very complex. One thing this does show, which I mentioned in the previous section, is that I really do have to do the roof of the single track engine shed. It really does stick out as against its two more illustrious, and given that all these buildings would have been built at the same time, it's just going to look odd. So that I will apply myself to before the next video. To get the bridge to sit exactly right, I've had to take a small cut out of that section, which is really the depth of the baseboard, the MDF baseboard, and then I will pack underneath so that as it comes across, it's level. There wasn't much out between the two, but it would have meant it going slightly uphill as it went over the bridge. The pannier is a powerful little thing, and it's only either pushing or pulling the auto coach, so it doesn't have a heavy load on it. But I didn't really want the bridge to be squint, otherwise it would look a bit odd. So that's everything here for this. By the time you see this next time round, I certainly want the track on and it powered. Whether I'll get as far as having everything wired up, I don't know. I suspect once I start, it will all. I'll just want to keep going, have everything done. But High Elven should at least have its station, engine shed and goods shed all in position and powered up and able to receive locomotives or other rolling stock. So let's move on now, and I think what I'm going to go to next is to talk about the next scratch build that I'm going to be doing once I've completed all the work on these buildings. Well, it's time to reveal the next scratch build on the layout, and this time around I'm going to be doing something based on something that somebody else has done. So let's reveal what the next scratch build will be. This is a copy of the plan of a signal box which Paul Chapman, whose channel is Galgorm Hall, you'll have heard me comment on his channel before, and he's doing an absolutely superb job of scratch building a signal box for his layout in a quite extensive series, and I'll put a link to the first of the series, and I've also put up on the screen just a screenshot of the introduction of one of his latest videos. I've been saying for a while that I would have a go at doing this because I think it would be nice to have this signal box up at High Elven managing certainly the junction. Whether it would manage the whole of the goods yard, I'm not sure, but it might do. But anyway, and I thought also it would be an interesting exercise to take something that has been built and designed in 00 gauge and adapt it, as I inevitably will need to do, to be able to build it in N gauge. Now, those of you will know that 00 gauge is at a ratio of 1 to 76, and N gauge is a ratio of 1 to 148, so not quite half the size of 00 gauge. When I started looking at this, if I bring this a little bit, you'll start seeing that I've begun to put in red, if I move square up now, begun to put in red, put it back in the light, the distances. What I've decided to do is to make a half scale of this building, because although I could try for an exact rescaling from 1 to 76 to 1 to 148, which is about 51.5% of the size, I would end up with some very, very funny distances, and frankly to a precision that just doesn't make sense. At the moment, all I've done is simply halved all of these sizes, and when I start to build the building, I'll see if it works, because I've not yet cut anything out to any of these sizes. And if I think that it makes it look a bit small, then I may have to enlarge them, in which case I'll have to adjust the sizes to keep everything in proportion. Rather handily, one of the things that Paul was able to make use of was a kit that Scale Model Scenery produced, I think at his request, but which is now generally available, which is a sets of windows for use up here in the signal box. I did have a think about asking Scale Model Scenery to see if they could produce something exactly half size. But one, I know how busy they are at the moment, and two, it occurred to me that actually when you start reducing down by half a size, the thicknesses of the internal parts of a window may be actually too thin to be able to cut laser that small. And so I started hunting around for alternative windows. And then I came across, which I'd completely forgotten that I had, a kit that was in my, I'll just move this out of the way to the back and bring you up a little. A kit that was in my box of unmade kits, which I bought very, very early on. And it's the Pico Signal Box kit, which I think, or Ratio, is it? Ratio. Which is intended to go into the signal box that they produce. And rather handily, in addition to having all the brass etch for lever frame and other internal things for the box, which I would need to get anyway, they also do these windows. And I think these will do just fine. But I am going to have to adapt this build because obviously the window frames that are the Scale Model Scenery ones are different sizes and actually fill the gap quite nicely. So it will be interesting as we go through this process of seeing how much I have to adapt this to be able to build this box. I have been able to source from yet another favourite of mine, York Model Rail. I don't know if you can see these. This is a plastic kit that allows you to make a set of steps that will be the steps up to the signal box. They're almost entirely the right height to get up to the signal box. I may have to put a little bit on the bottom. It's not the same design as Paul is using, and I think we're just about to see in the next week or so, or maybe even, he may even release the same thing as the day this is going out, of what look to me to be some scratch built steps, which will take some doing. I think these are going to be fiddly enough, so we'll see where that gets us. So far I have pretty much everything. I think this will be brick clad, and I'm going to have a go at some of the techniques that he has shown in his videos, and they really are superb techniques. His painting techniques give really amazing effect. So we'll see how those come out once I can acquire the paints. I'm not going to rush at this particularly. I'm going to try and do this alongside the building of High Elven, which is my main priority. And I will show you this at the various stages, particularly as I start proving whether the design halved down gives me something that I can work with, and what adjustments I need to make to be able to create the building. So that's the next scratch build, and I think that pretty much actually brings us to the end of this edition of Elvenhome. It's been quite a potpourri of various things. I'm conscious I haven't shown you the new gimbal. That's because I'm really now running out of time for this video, and also I haven't had much time to use it, but I promise I will have a go because I want to get some running shots in for the next edition. The layout is just covered in too many things while I'm building High Elven at the moment to be able to run any trains. But if you have liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. That's all very helpful. If you haven't subscribed, well, please do subscribe. It would be great to have you along. And if you've got any comments, well, please leave comments. I get so many useful and helpful comments that have really helped me in the design and build of the layout. And so if you've got anything to say, please do. And apart from anything else, I really enjoy replying to them. So until I speak to you again in a fortnight's time, That's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.